"Oh, Mom, I'm almost there," I shouted into the phone, my voice trembling with relief and anticipation. I could almost feel her presence, smell the familiar scent of her home, imagine her rushing to open the door with that tired but loving smile she always wore. After all these months of silence, after all the lies and betrayals, I had finally gathered the courage to reach out. But it was too late. The line went dead. I froze, staring at my phone, hoping it was just a glitch, that she would call back, that somehow, the distance and the mistakes could be erased with words. But the truth hit me like a cold, merciless wind. My words were in vain. The bridge I had hoped to rebuild had already crumbled beneath the weight of secrets, infidelities, and broken trust. Every step I had taken to come back to her, the long drives, the endless rehearsed apologies, the trembling hope in my chest, felt meaningless now. The emptiness pressed in around me, suffocating, bitter, relentless. I had imagined this reunion countless times, each scenario ending in laughter, forgiveness, a hug that would erase years of regret. Instead, I was left with silence. The car hummed beneath me as I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. Memories I had tried to bury surged forward, the late nights of betrayal, the whispered excuses, the lies I told myself to survive. Each memory stabbed at my chest, a reminder that some wounds cannot be undone with a simple phone call. I wanted to scream, to cry, to beg the universe for another chance, but all I could do was sit there, my heart a fractured mosaic of hope and despair. "Mom, I tried," I whispered, barely audible even to myself. I really tried. And in that moment, the reality settled over me. Some truths, some betrayals, some absences, are too heavy to mend. Some apologies arrived too late. But even in the ache of failure, a flicker of determination remained. I knew I couldn't undo the past, but maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to face the consequences of my own actions, and somehow, piece together a future from the shards of my mistakes. The road ahead blurred as my tears mixed with the rain streaking across the windshield. I had tried, really tried, to reach her, to make her understand, to explain the tangled mess of my mistakes, but every word felt hollow, every excuse a flimsy shield against the truth I could no longer hide. I parked the car a few blocks from her house, unable to bring myself to knock on the door. Part of me still longed for her forgiveness, for the warmth that had once filled every corner of her embrace. But another part, the part that had lived with betrayal, deceit, and guilt, knew I was not the same child she had raised. I had stumbled, failed, and lost my way in ways that could not simply be undone. I replayed the events in my mind, the nights I chose temptation over honesty, the whispered words behind closed doors, the fleeting moments of passion that shattered lives. My heart ached, not just for myself, but for the damage I had inflicted, the trust I had stolen, the innocence I had destroyed. Each memory felt like a sharpened blade, cutting deeper with every thought. I wandered the empty streets, the neon lights reflecting my fractured state of mind. The city felt indifferent to my pain, its noise and chaos mocking my private agony. I passed a cafe, its warm glow spilling onto the sidewalk, families laughing inside, their lives untouched by my mistakes. I envied them, the simplicity of a life without betrayal, without the constant shadow of regret. And then I saw her. Not her exactly, but a reflection of what I had lost, a woman standing by a window, holding a cup of tea, staring into the distance with a quiet sorrow that mirrored my own. I felt my chest tighten. Was this a vision, a cruel trick of the mind, or a glimpse of what I could never reclaim? I sank to the curb, clutching my phone as if it could somehow reach back in time and undo everything. "Mom," I whispered again, my voice breaking, "I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to be this person," but the rain drowned my words, and no answer came. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes, and in the solitude, a chilling thought took root. The infidelities I had committed, the lies I had told myself, were not just scars on my soul, they had set off a chain of consequences, reaching far beyond my own family. Friends had been hurt, relationships destroyed, and the whispers of betrayal had begun to ripple outward, touching lives I had barely imagined. And yet, amidst the despair, a small, stubborn spark of resolve remained. I could not undo the past. I could not force forgiveness, nor erase the betrayals, but I could face the truth, own my actions, and confront the tangled web I had spun. Perhaps it was not redemption I sought, but acknowledgement, understanding, and the courage to face the consequences of who I had become. I rose from the curb, soaked and shivering, but with a clarity that had eluded me for months. The night was dark, the streets empty, but I was no longer hiding from the truth. I would go home, confront the shadows of my choices, and begin the impossible work of reconciling with the wreckage I had left behind. As I walked toward the dim glow of my apartment, my phone buzzed. A message appeared, brief and stark: "We need to talk. It's not too late to explain." But you must be honest this time. My heart leapt and sank at the same time. This was the opportunity I had longed for, the fragile bridge back to a woman I loved more than life itself. But fear clawed at me, fear that my words could never undo the damage, that my truth might be too heavy to bear. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every lie, every betrayal, every moment of weakness pressing on my shoulders. And I knew, with terrifying certainty, that the conversation to come would not just reveal my sins, it would expose my soul, raw and trembling, to the person I had hurt most in the world. And still, despite the terror, I moved forward, because some truths, no matter how painful, demand to be faced. The apartment door felt heavier than usual as I pushed it open. Each step echoed in the empty hallway, a cruel reminder of the silence that had become my companion for months. I set my keys on the counter, my hands trembling, and stared at my reflection in the darkened window. The person staring back at me was both familiar and foreign, worn from sleepless nights, haunted by mistakes, yet unwilling to run anymore. Then, a knock at the door shattered the quiet. My heart lurched. She was here, finally. I opened the door to find her standing there, umbrella dripping, eyes wary but sharp, scanning me as if measuring the depth of the man I had become. She was smaller than I remembered, yet her presence commanded everything in the room. Every memory I had of her rushed back, bedtime stories, bandaged knees, whispered advice in the dark. And now, the same woman who had nurtured me was here, and I had to face her. Mom, my voice faltered. I didn't mean. She held up a hand. Don't start with excuses. Her eyes were stormy, a mix of hurt and disbelief. Do you know how long I've waited to hear you say the truth without twisting it, without hiding behind your choices? I swallowed, the lump in my throat almost unbearable. I know, I whispered. I've replayed everything 1,000 times. I tried to reach you, I tried to explain, but I know that my words aren't enough. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The apartment felt smaller, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on both of us. It's not just words, she said quietly, it's actions. It's everything you've done, the people you've hurt, the lies you've lived. It's every time you thought you could choose yourself over the people who trusted you. I nodded, unable to meet her gaze. The shame and guilt roared through me. I know, I betrayed trust, more than once. I was selfish, I wanted things I shouldn't have, and I hurt you, and others, in the process. I'm not asking for forgiveness yet, Mom. I need you to know that I understand what I've done. I understand the damage. Her eyes softened for a fleeting second, then hardened again. Understanding doesn't undo anything. Do you realize what your actions caused? Friends lost, relationships broken, our family fragmented. And you think an apology fixes that? I closed my eyes, feeling the tears I had held back for months finally burn through. No, I admitted. It doesn't. I know that. But it's all I have to start making things right. I can't change the past, but I want to face it, confront it, even if it means losing you forever. She sank into the chair across from me, arms crossed, eyes glinting with a mix of anger and pain. You don't get to choose the outcome. That's not how this works. You're going to have to live with what you've done, and I have to decide if I can even look at you the same way again. The room was silent except for the soft patter of rain against the window. I could feel every heartbeat, every breath, the weight of every broken promise pressing down on me. The truth I had tried to hold at bay for so long was finally here, raw and undeniable. And yet, in that silence, something shifted. She spoke again, softer this time. I can see that you're trying. I can see the regret. But trying isn't enough. Actions, real actions, sustained over time, that's what matters. Words can't fix this, not entirely. You have to earn it. I nodded, tears streaking my face. I will. I'll do whatever it takes. I don't expect forgiveness, not yet. But I promise I'll try every day to be worthy of it. I'll face every consequence. I'll make amends, even if it takes a lifetime. She looked at me long and hard, the storm in her eyes softening into something more fragile, hesitation, maybe even hope. Then, start showing me, not with words, but with who you become. Because right now, all I see is the person who broke my trust. I took a deep, trembling breath. I'll start today. And in that moment, the first threads of a fragile reconciliation began to form, not complete, not perfect, but real. The road ahead was long, littered with mistakes and the ghosts of betrayal. But for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of possibility, a chance to rebuild what had been lost, even if it required confronting every shadow of my past, every consequence of my actions, and every painful truth I had tried to hide. Because healing would not be easy, redemption would not be instant, and the weight of infidelity would not vanish overnight. But facing it, honestly, openly, that was the first step towards something I thought I had lost forever: trust, connection, and perhaps, one day, love again. The days that followed were heavy with tension. Every moment I spent around my mother was a reminder of the fragile thread upon which our connection now balanced. I tried to act, to show her that I had changed, that I was no longer the person who had betrayed her trust and broken her heart. But the shadow of my past loomed everywhere: small reminders of my mistakes, whispered doubts in her eyes, and my own conscience that refused to let me rest. I began with small acts: helping around her house, cooking meals just like she used to, listening when she spoke, and staying silent when I knew I had nothing worthy to say. Yet even these simple gestures were met with skepticism. I could see the questions in her gaze: can you really change? Can I trust you again? Then came the first real consequence. A letter arrived, written by someone from my past, someone I had hurt in ways I hadn't fully faced. It detailed not just betrayal, but the ripple effect of my infidelity: friendships fractured, reputations damaged, lives upended. Reading it felt like a punch to the chest. My mother saw the tears streaming down my face. "Do you see now?" she asked softly. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of every disappointment, every sleepless night I had caused her. "This isn't just about us. It's never been just about us. Every choice you made has consequences beyond what you imagined. And you need to understand that, fully." I nodded, choking back the shame. "I know. I see it now. I've lived in my selfishness, thinking the world revolved around me and my desires. I hurt people, and I can't take it back. But I can try to make it right, even if it takes years." The following week was a test of endurance. I contacted those I had wronged, offering apologies, explanations, and attempts at restitution. Not everyone responded. Some rejected me outright, their anger palpable, their pain raw. Others accepted my apology cautiously, like fragile glass, easily shattered by doubt. But through each interaction, I learned something vital: true accountability is not measured by words, but by consistent action over time. Meanwhile, my relationship with my mother remained precarious. Some days, she would offer warmth, a tentative smile, a shared cup of tea that reminded me of childhood. Other days, her distance was a knife to my chest, and I felt as though the chasm I had created was insurmountable. I began to understand a truth I had avoided for too long: trust, once broken, does not heal overnight. It rebuilds in increments, and every misstep, every lapse in judgment, could undo progress. Then came the moment that truly tested me. My mother confronted me, not with anger, but with sorrow, the kind that cuts deeper than rage ever could. "I want to believe you've changed," she said. "I want to trust you again. But it's not just about wanting, it's about seeing it, feeling it. You must show me through every action, every choice, every day. Are you ready for that?" Her question lingered in the room like a shadow I could not escape. I realized that redemption was not a destination, it was a journey, often exhausting, painful, and fraught with uncertainty. And yet, I was ready. I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I'll spend every day proving it. I don't know how long it will take, or if it will ever be enough, but I will try. I will not hide. I will face every consequence, and I will rebuild what I've broken." In that moment, a fragile hope bloomed, a recognition that while some scars would never fade, healing was possible through relentless effort, honesty, and courage. But life had one final cruel twist waiting for me. Just as I thought I had begun to navigate the consequences of my own actions, I discovered that the infidelity had consequences I had never foreseen. My past lover had begun spreading rumors, reaching friends and family I hadn't even imagined being affected. I was forced to confront the public fallout of my mistakes, gossip, judgment, and whispers that followed me like a shadow. It was overwhelming, yet necessary. I could not control how others perceived me, I could only control my response, my actions, and my willingness to endure. And through it all, my mother's presence was the anchor. She did not forgive me easily, but she stayed, a reminder that even fractured love can persist, even in the face of betrayal. That night, after a long day of apologies, confrontations, and quiet moments of reflection, I sat alone in the dim glow of my apartment. The weight of my past lay heavy, yet amidst the exhaustion, a spark of determination remained. I had faced the consequences, begun the journey of restitution, and taken the first steps toward rebuilding the trust I had shattered. And I knew one undeniable truth: the path to redemption would be long, painful, and uncertain, but it was the only path worth walking. Because the alternative, avoiding responsibility, hiding from the shadows of my mistakes, was no longer an option. I whispered into the quiet room, a vow I intended to keep: I will not let the pain of my past define the rest of my life. I will endure. I will rebuild. And one day, perhaps, I will earn what I've lost. The following weeks were a crucible. Every day, I faced reminders of the destruction I had caused, not just in my own life, but in the lives of everyone I had touched. Friends avoided me in the streets, whispers followed me in cafes, in hallways, even in places I once called safe. The infidelity I had thought was a private sin had spread like wildfire, leaving charred remains of relationships I had once taken for granted. Yet, through this chaos, I found myself walking a tightrope of accountability. I reached out to those I had betrayed, friends, former lovers, even acquaintances who had been collateral in my selfishness. Some met me with anger so fierce it could have burned buildings, others with tears that reflected my own remorse back at me. The apologies I had rehearsed over months felt inadequate, but I spoke them anyway, my voice raw, carrying the weight of every mistake I had made. But it was my mother who remained the truest test of all. She did not offer forgiveness lightly. Her trust was a fragile thing, brittle from the years of disappointment, and yet she stayed close, her presence both a comfort and a challenge. Every conversation, every shared meal, every quiet moment together was a test of my sincerity. One evening, as I returned home exhausted from yet another series of confrontations, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. Her eyes were softer that night, tinged with an emotion I had almost forgotten, hope. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, "not just about you, but about us, about how this family, this life, has been fractured. I can see that you're trying, truly trying, but do you know what the hardest part is?" I shook my head, my throat tight. "It's that I want to trust you again, but I can't just will it into existence. Trust isn't given lightly, it's earned. And it's earned by watching someone fight for it every single day, even when it's hard, even when the world tells them it's impossible." Her words pierced me deeper than anger ever could. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I understand, and I'll fight for it. Every day, I'll prove that I can be someone worthy of that trust, even if it takes my entire life." Then came the public consequences, consequences I had never anticipated. Rumors of my infidelity had reached distant relatives, friends of friends, and even colleagues who had once admired me. Confrontations arose unexpectedly, sometimes polite, sometimes searingly harsh, forcing me to face the full scope of my mistakes. I had to endure anger, disbelief, and even hatred from people I had once cared for deeply. In these moments, I learned the true meaning of accountability. It is not simply admitting guilt, but standing exposed, vulnerable, and committed to repair even when the world seems determined to judge you. Some people refused to forgive, and that was their right. Others accepted small gestures of change, cautious and fragile, like saplings reaching for sunlight through a storm. Yet amidst all this, small victories began to emerge. A friend who had turned away months ago returned, hesitantly offering a conversation. A distant cousin, once critical and judgmental, sent a simple note acknowledging my effort to change. And my mother, always the anchor, began to allow glimpses of the woman I had once known, the warmth and love that had endured despite my failures. The process was grueling. Every day felt like walking through fire, every action measured against a standard I had long ignored. But in this struggle, I discovered something vital. Redemption is not an event, it is a transformation. It is the willingness to face consequences, to endure pain, and to actively create healing where destruction once reigned. One night, exhausted and drained, I found myself sitting with my mother on the porch. The world was quiet, the city lights flickering in the distance. I reached for her hand cautiously, almost afraid, and she did not pull away. "I don't fully trust you yet," she said, her voice soft, "but I can see the effort. And for now, that's enough to start rebuilding." I exhaled, tears streaming down my face. "Thank you. I won't waste it. I'll keep proving it, every single day." That night, as I lay in bed, I realized a profound truth. The consequences of infidelity are not just emotional, they are a mirror, reflecting every flaw, every weakness, and every failure of character. But within that reflection lies the opportunity to grow, to rebuild, and to redefine oneself. I knew the road ahead would be long, marked by doubt, setbacks, and the occasional heartbreak. But I also knew that for the first time, I was facing it honestly, without hiding, without excuses, and without pretending that the past could be undone. And in that quiet moment, I whispered a vow to the night, to myself, and to my mother: no matter how long it takes, I will rebuild what I've broken. I will face every shadow of my past. And I will never stop fighting for trust, love, and the life I almost destroyed. Because I had learned the hardest truth of all: some bridges, once burned, can be rebuilt, but only with courage, persistence, and an unwavering commitment to the truth. The weeks blurred together, each day a trial of patience, humility, and endurance. I had learned that redemption was not a single moment but a series of relentless choices, a constant confrontation with the shadows of my past. And yet, even as I rebuilt connections, even as small glimmers of trust returned, I knew the hardest part was still ahead, proving that I could not only face the consequences of my actions but transform my life entirely. It began with a confrontation I had feared since the day my infidelity had been exposed. The people I had wronged, friends, former lovers, colleagues, even distant family members, gathered in the dimly lit cafe where so many of my mistakes had begun. Their faces were a mixture of anger, disappointment, and sorrow, and as I stepped forward, my heart pounded like a war drum. "You think you can walk back into our lives and fix this?" one of them demanded, his voice sharp, trembling with betrayal. "Do you think your apologies erase the pain you caused?" I met his gaze, feeling the weight of every tear I had made fall, every sleepless night I had inflicted, every trust I had broken. "No," I said, my voice steady despite the fear twisting in my chest. "I know words cannot erase the past. But I am here to face the consequences. I am here to rebuild, step by step, to show that I am not the person who hurt you. Actions, not words, will prove that." For hours, they questioned me, challenged me, tested my resolve. Each accusation, each reminder of my failures, was a knife to the heart. And yet, I did not flinch. I spoke honestly, admitted every misstep, and bore the scrutiny without deflection. Slowly, the tension in the room shifted, not fully resolved, but beginning to crack. Small acknowledgements, tentative glances, and cautious gestures of acceptance began to replace suspicion and anger. But the ultimate test awaited me at home. My mother, the anchor of my existence, had agreed to meet me in the garden behind her house, a place where we had shared countless childhood memories. The sky was heavy with clouds, mirroring the storm in my chest. As I approached, I saw her waiting, her posture both wary and expectant, her eyes reflecting the depth of a woman who had weathered betrayal but still held love beneath the surface. "I've watched you these past months," she began, her voice calm yet unyielding. "I see your effort. I see that you are trying to change. But I must know, is this transformation permanent? Are you ready to live a life of honesty, responsibility, and integrity, even when it is hardest? Because if you falter now, the bridges we are rebuilding could collapse forever." I swallowed, the enormity of the moment pressing down on me. "Mom, I promise you, this is not temporary. Every day, I will choose honesty over deception, courage over fear, and love over selfishness. I will not falter. I will rebuild what I've broken, and I will never take your trust for granted again." She studied me for what felt like an eternity, the silence between us heavier than any words. Then, slowly, she extended her hand. "Then we begin anew," she said softly, not as if nothing happened, but with the understanding that the past is a teacher, not a jailer. "Let us see how far you are willing to go to prove yourself." Tears burned my eyes as I took her hand. In that simple gesture, I felt the weight of forgiveness, fragile, tentative, yet powerful beyond measure. It was not complete reconciliation, not total trust, but it was a beginning. And for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope that was untainted by fear or regret. The days that followed were marked by deliberate effort. I showed up for every responsibility, repaired relationships, and faced challenges I had long avoided. Every action was measured, intentional, and aimed at proving that my transformation was genuine. Slowly, trust returned, not fully, not immediately, but in fragments, building like delicate glass into something strong enough to withstand the storms of life. Then came the ultimate test, an unexpected family crisis that required me to step fully into responsibility. A distant relative, once estranged, suffered a severe accident, and the family looked to me for support. This was not just a test of my intentions but of my actions, my ability to prioritize others over myself, and my capacity to bear the weight of responsibility without faltering. I rose to the occasion. I coordinated care, reconciled disagreements among relatives, and supported my mother emotionally through the ordeal. Every choice I made reinforced the truth that I had changed, not just through words or promises, but through action, consistency, and courage. In the quiet moments after the crisis, as I sat with my mother in the soft glow of the evening, I realized something profound. Redemption is not about erasing the past, it is about forging a new path through it. Every mistake I had made, every betrayal, every moment of weakness had taught me lessons no success or happiness ever could. And now, having faced the consequences fully, I understood the true meaning of responsibility, love, and integrity. She looked at me, her eyes soft but unwavering. "I can see it now," she said. "You are not the person who betrayed me. You are someone stronger, wiser, and more aware. But remember, this is a lifelong journey. You must continue to prove it every day, in every choice, and in every moment of temptation." I whispered, the words carrying the weight of every lesson learned, every consequence faced, and every moment of growth. I will not stop, not ever. And in that shared silence, I felt the first true sense of peace I had known in months, the knowledge that while the past could never be undone, the future was mine to shape, rebuild, and honor. For the first time, I understood that forgiveness is not a gift freely given, it is earned, nurtured, and safeguarded through relentless courage, unflinching honesty, and a willingness to face every shadow of one's own mistakes. And as the sun set behind us, painting the sky with gold and crimson, I whispered to myself, I have faced the consequences. I have endured the pain. I have begun to rebuild. And now, I will rise, stronger than before, worthy of the trust I almost destroyed. The months that followed were unlike anything I had ever experienced. Every day, every interaction, was a test of my resolve, my honesty, and my commitment to change. The shadows of my past lingered, but I faced them head-on, refusing to let them define the person I was becoming. Slowly, painfully, I began to stitch together the fragments of my life, rebuilding bridges I had thought were permanently burned. My relationship with my mother deepened in ways I had never imagined. She allowed me glimpses of trust, small acts of intimacy, shared meals, late-night conversations, quiet walks in the park, that reminded me of the bond we had almost lost forever. Each moment was precious, fragile, a testament to resilience and patience. Do you see it now? She asked one evening as we watched the sun set, her hand resting lightly on mine. The difference between who you were and who you're becoming? I do, I said softly, and I know it's not enough to say it. I have to show it every day. But I promise, I will keep showing it. Rebuilding trust with others was equally challenging. Friends who had turned away months ago slowly returned, their skepticism tempered by the consistency of my actions. Former lovers, colleagues, even distant relatives began to see that my transformation was genuine. Every apology, every act of support, every honest moment strengthened the fragile web of relationships I had once shattered. And yet, the greatest transformation was within me. I had spent so long running from guilt, shame, and the consequences of my choices. Now, I embraced them fully. I understood that true redemption is not about escaping pain or erasing mistakes, it is about facing them, learning from them, and committing to a better path forward. Then came a moment that would forever mark the turning point of my journey. My mother and I were invited to a family gathering, a rare occasion where all branches of our family converged. I felt the familiar pang of anxiety, knowing that many there had once judged me harshly, whispered about my failures, and questioned my worthiness. But I walked in with my head held high. I had nothing to hide, no false pretenses, no rehearsed words. I faced every gaze, every questioning glance, every subtle reminder of my past mistakes with honesty and courage. The evening was tense at first. Conversations began cautiously, old wounds resurfacing, the air thick with unspoken judgment. But as the night wore on, something remarkable happened. My actions, my sincerity, my willingness to confront the past without excuses, began to break down walls. Friends laughed again in my presence, family members offered tentative smiles, and even those who had been most skeptical acknowledged the change in me. By the end of the evening, I realized a truth I had only glimpsed in fragments before: redemption is not granted by others, it is demonstrated through unwavering commitment, humility, and a willingness to endure the discomfort of facing every consequence. Returning home with my mother, the quiet of the night felt different. It was not filled with tension or fear, but with a sense of hard-won peace. She turned to me, her eyes glistening with emotion. "You've done something remarkable," she said softly, "not because the past has been erased, but because you faced it with courage, honesty, and humility. You've shown me that people can change, and that even broken trust can be rebuilt when met with persistence and sincerity." Tears welled in my eyes as I embraced her, feeling the weight of months of regret, struggle, and effort lift slightly from my shoulders. "Thank you," I whispered. "I couldn't have done this without you. Without your patience, your presence, your willingness to allow me the chance to rebuild." She hugged me tighter. "The past is never erased, but it no longer controls us. We have the choice to move forward, to rebuild, to create something stronger and more enduring than before." In that moment, I understood the full meaning of redemption. It was not a destination, not a single act, not a fleeting moment of forgiveness. It was a journey, a lifelong commitment to integrity, responsibility, and love. It was the courage to face the consequences of every mistake, the resilience to endure pain, and the humility to accept that some bridges, once burned, could only be rebuilt slowly, carefully, and with unwavering dedication. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the life I had once thought irreparably broken began to take shape anew. I rebuilt my relationships, reclaimed trust, and forged a bond with my mother that was deeper, more resilient, and more authentic than I could have imagined. The scars of the past remained, but they were no longer chains. They were reminders of lessons learned, strength gained, and love reclaimed. And in the quiet moments, when I reflected on the journey from despair to hope, I whispered to myself, I have faced the darkest parts of myself. I have endured the consequences. I have rebuilt what I thought was lost. And now, I am ready, not perfect, but stronger, wiser, and committed to living a life worthy of trust, love, and forgiveness. The storm had passed, but the calm that followed was earned. And for the first time in a long time, I believed, not in a fleeting illusion of happiness, but in the enduring power of resilience, redemption, and the human heart's capacity to rebuild itself from the ashes of its own mistakes. The months of struggle, reflection, and tireless effort had forged a new version of me. I was not perfect, nor had I erased the past, but I had confronted every shadow of my mistakes, endured the consequences, and begun to rebuild what had been broken. Yet, deep down, I knew that true redemption would demand one final test, a moment where my resolve, honesty, and commitment to change would face its ultimate trial. It came unexpectedly. My mother received a letter from a distant relative, someone who had remained estranged due to my past betrayals. The letter was polite but firm, expressing doubt that I had truly changed. It demanded a meeting, face to face, unguarded, with the entire family present. The weight of this challenge pressed heavily on me. This was not just about proving myself to strangers, it was a symbolic reckoning of all the pain I had caused, all the lives affected by my infidelity, and the credibility of my transformation. I knew that failing this test could unravel the progress I had fought so hard to achieve. On the day of the gathering, I arrived early, heart pounding, palms sweating, and mind racing through every possible scenario. My mother walked beside me, a steady anchor amidst the storm of my anxiety. She whispered quietly, "Remember, it's not about perfection. It's about honesty, courage, and consistency. Show them who you are now, not who you were." The room was tense when I entered. Relatives, friends, and distant acquaintances, all eyes were fixed on me, measuring, judging, recalling the past. I could feel the collective weight of their doubts pressing down, suffocating and relentless. But instead of shrinking, I squared my shoulders and met every gaze with openness. The conversation began cautiously. Questions were asked, accusations aired, memories of betrayal recounted. I answered each honestly, acknowledging my failures, owning my mistakes, and detailing the steps I had taken to make amends. The air was thick with emotion, anger, hurt, skepticism, and, for some, tentative curiosity. Hours passed in this delicate crucible of confrontation. I faced challenges not just from others, but from within myself, the lingering guilt, the fear of rejection, the haunting memories of the harm I had caused. Yet I stood firm. Each response, each gesture of honesty, each act of accountability chipped away at the walls of doubt. Slowly, cautiously, the atmosphere began to shift. One by one, people began to respond, not with immediate forgiveness, but with acknowledgement. A friend who had once walked away now extended a hand, tentative but sincere. A distant cousin nodded, the skepticism in their eyes softening. And finally, my mother, always the anchor, the barometer of my redemption, stood and approached me. Her eyes, glistening with emotion, met mine. "I've watched you endure," she said, her voice steady but trembling with emotion. "I've seen your actions, your honesty, your willingness to face the consequences. You have proven, not through words alone, but through relentless effort, that you are not the person who betrayed me. You have faced every shadow of your past and chosen to walk a new path." Tears streamed down my face as I knelt before her, overwhelmed by relief, gratitude, and humility. "Thank you," I whispered. "I don't deserve your trust, yet you've given me a chance. I promise to honor it, every day, for the rest of my life." She placed a hand gently on my shoulder. "Trust is not given freely, but you have earned the right to rebuild it. Remember this moment, not as a reward, but as a reminder of the responsibility you carry. Redemption is a journey, and today, you've proven that you are willing to walk it fully." The rest of the room began to soften as well. Conversations turned warmer, smiles emerged, and tentative gestures of reconciliation spread like fragile light through the room. The collective acknowledgement of my effort, my honesty, and my transformation created a moment of profound relief and quiet triumph. That night, after the gathering ended and the last guest had left, my mother and I sat in the garden, the moon casting silver light over the flowers we had tended together for years. She reached for my hand, her touch firm but comforting. "You've come so far," she said softly, "but remember, the work is never done. Life will test you again, choices will arise, temptations will appear, but now you know the path forward, you know how to face it." I do, I replied, tears still wet on my cheeks, and I will continue walking it. No matter how difficult, no matter how painful, no matter how lonely, I will honor the trust I've regained, the relationships I've rebuilt, and the lessons I've learned. The storm of my past had finally passed, leaving behind the calm after a long and arduous battle. I had faced betrayal, infidelity, and the consequences of my own selfish choices. I had endured judgment, rejection, and the relentless shadow of guilt. And through it all, I had emerged transformed, not perfect, but stronger, wiser, and fully aware of the weight of my actions. As I looked up at the stars, I whispered into the night, a vow that would guide the rest of my life. I have faced the darkest parts of myself, endured every consequence, rebuilt what I destroyed, and reclaimed trust, love, and integrity. From now on, I will live with courage, honesty, and unwavering commitment, honoring the lessons of my past and the possibilities of my future. And in that moment, I understood fully, redemption is not an endpoint. It is a journey, a daily choice, a lifelong commitment to truth, accountability, and love. And I was ready to walk it step by step, moment by moment, for the rest of my life.